Okay, so we've got a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Vikrant here. You are behind Future Today, which is disrupting the way that ad-supported streaming works. You've got tons and tons of channels now that range from pretty much every single demographic out there. That's providing really good quality content, reaching millions of people, and you're able to fund it through this business model of ad-supported. So I'm excited to have you here and talk about what you're building and how it all works.
Thank you, Tony.
Awesome. Well, Vikrant, so first I'd love to just kind of go back and understand, how did you get interested in entrepreneurship in the specific category? I'd love to just learn a little bit more about you.
Absolutely. So we started the company in 2006. Back then, I and my business partner Alok, we had just graduated from business schools. We were really interested in the media space because online video was starting to just come about. YouTube had just been launched. I don't think it had even been acquired by Google at that point in time. And so we just fundamentally felt that online video would change the way people ever consumed content. And so with that sort of thesis in mind, we decided to launch a website for food and cooking enthusiasts called ifood.tv. And it was essentially a place where foodies could go share content, recipes, ideas, and folks that were looking for that content could go and consume it, but consume it in video format as opposed to, reading out or printing out a page with recipe and instructions and whatnot. And so that's how we got started. I'm an engineer by education. And so I was really fascinated about the technological aspect of it, with video over IP and things like that. And then, seeing an opportunity generally in the media space with the landscape changing and content distribution being democratized, we felt like this was a pretty unique and interesting place to be.
Mhm. So how did this get started?
So when we got started, it's interesting because from an idea standpoint, it was a relatively straightforward idea, but from an execution standpoint, it was very, very tricky because if you rewind 20 years ago, simple things like hosting a video and streaming it were not so simple. And so as we were thinking about building the platform, ironically, the technology was the biggest challenge, right? Because there were not a lot of options available for folks to go out and essentially, license technology that can then be used for hosting, encoding, streaming of content, right? Um, the data storage costs were very high. And so we had to essentially build out the whole platform ourselves using open source and other types of technologies because we were bootstrapping the company and we didn't really have a lot of venture capital to throw around this problem. And so blessing in disguise, we now have a platform that we've built from scratch. It's been built specifically for the needs of video streaming. And initially it was just streaming on the desktop, but then as the iOS platform came about, as the Android App Store came about, right? We expanded into the mobile space, and then eventually with CTV, with Roku in 2010, 2011, got into the CTV business. And so we had to really sort of continue to build out that platform and technology to be able to distribute that content over any or through any endpoint, not just the desktop. So that was the biggest problem for us to solve. And the first year and a half was just building out this technology that could allow users to upload a piece of video, upload the content, and then go out and distribute it and stream it. So.
Mhm. So were you making content initially, or were you mostly trying to find people to partner with on content?
We had to seed the website with some content, so we partnered with a number of chefs in the New York tri-state area, where we would it's how you bootstrap the company and really at the ground level try to get something going. And so we hired an intern who was studying media and technology who wanted to build out, his portfolio. And so we got him to go with us to, various restaurants. A lot of these chefs wanted to be on TV, on Food Network, and so they saw this as a stepping stone to that endeavor. And so we created, I think, about 100 videos initially, where we would go out and we would go to these restaurants and partner up with these chefs who would in a day prepare 4, 5, 6 recipes, and we would just over a span of 3 to 4 hours go shoot these videos, bring them back, edit them, and then upload them on the website. And so that's how we got started initially, just seeding the website with some of our own content. And then eventually we started partnering up with a lot of these digital creators who were putting content up on YouTube, and got the licenses to host that and upload that content on our website as well. And so that's sort of how we got started.
Mm. How does the model work for these, partners so that they're compensated, they're probably compensated more than like a typical, YouTube ad?
Yeah, so the model is in most cases we would essentially take the content, license it for our websites and our streaming services that we have, and then just do a rev share with them on the back end, right? That's typically how it works. But we also work with a lot of big production, household name brand studios, and with those guys we typically just license the content, and we would pay them an upfront fee, and then we get to sort of take the risk with that content in terms of monetization, whatnot. So and in many cases we also have a platform business where, in addition to licensing content for our own services, we can also, if you have a big enough library of content, we can also launch streaming services for you with your own brand, right? And so that's another sort of value proposition for a lot of our partners who are sitting on a wealth of content, where they could have their own streaming service that their fans can go to and consume all their content.
Why structure it with like kind of this channel structure? Why have different channels with different content on them like that, instead of more of like a catalog approach?
It's a function of how we've evolved. When we started again, back in 2010, 2011, and we launched our service, the food and cooking service. It's called iFood.tv. We launched it on all of these streaming devices. What happened was, a lot of our content partners came to us and they said it's great to be a part of iFood and be able to watch our content on iFood, but we have 1 million or 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. We would love to have our own app that we could send our fans to, and they could stream and watch our content on the big screen. And by the way, we can't pay you for any of that work, right? So we had to come up with a model where we could do it in a way that it doesn't break the bank for these folks, and gives us the ability to, one, get access to more content, and two, build out a bigger sort of base of users and audience. Because now, instead of having just one app on the App Store, you could now have 15, 20, 50, 100, right? It's sort of the cereal box strategy, right? When you go to the grocery store, you have 15 different brands of cereal from the same company and different flavors. And so we weren't really looking out for that business model. It sort of fell into our lap, and we felt like it made a lot of sense. And this also happened at the same time when folks like Roku and Amazon TV were launching their own streaming devices, and they wanted a lot of streaming services on their platform, right? So they actually welcomed that idea, because it was easy for them to again grow the App Store and the streaming ecosystem that they were trying to promote. So we felt like it worked for everybody. It worked for us, gave us a lot more scale. It worked for the content partners, and it worked for the OEMs.
What made you interested in having a kids dedicated, channel? I mean, it seemed to be like you really had an idea for what that could look like far before this became something that was really popular in the space?
Yeah, it was. I would say it was again an accident. I had just had our first child. She was 2 years of age, and she was, as with most kids, she was stealing my phone every time she could, and going and watching nursery rhymes, bedtime stories, and other types of content on YouTube. And YouTube, again, being the wild west that it was and perhaps still is, we felt like it was a dangerous place to be. And so, having all this infrastructure that we had, we felt like, why not launch a channel for kids and families? Because if nothing else, our own kids would watch it and be worth it. And so we launched Happy Kids as sort of this, kids and family streaming service. And, literally within a few months of launch, the Happy Kids service was doing, I don't know, I can't exactly remember, maybe 4 to 5 times the traffic that we were doing on iFood and all the other apps that we had launched. And so that's when it really hit home. And again, just thinking of it, both as a parent as well as, as an entrepreneur, it made sense to us, right? Because kids watch so much content. And so just given, all of those dynamics, we felt like it's a really interesting space to be. And we started to double down on it and license a lot more content and, build a lot more audience. But it was accidental, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you recognize that opportunity, fairly early and become very significant of a category now, which is, I think, part of the reason you had a lot of success with this in general, which, is really smart. When you think about just, the way ads are done, now ads have gotten smarter. They're more trying to be more personalized, to you. How do you think about ads? How has your ad strategy evolved over time?
Yeah, it's gotten a lot more mature. It's gotten a lot more sophisticated, right? Back in the day, uh, a lot of the buys that were happening on CTV, they were an extension of the digital video buys that the agencies were making, right? So CTV was essentially a line item, and for the most part, it was a added value component to the campaign. Now, obviously, as viewers have started to or continued to migrate in a more meaningful way from linear television, cable television into streaming, brands are trying to follow those users and audience, right? But they want the same quality, right, in terms of the experience. So they want that big 60-inch lean back experience, the premiumness of traditional television. But they also want the benefits of digital measurement, targeting and attribution. And so that's really where things have gotten a lot more sophisticated in terms of how these brands are reaching out to these users and finding these audiences. And that's where I feel like we still have a lot of work to do. But, in terms of how you take your audience, how you segment it, how you create packages, what type of curation goes into it, whether it's, traditional ways of targeting a cohort, age, gender, interest based, or whether it's contextual, right? There's all these ways now in which a brand can really get in front of the user and create that engagement that is so much superior than what they could have done either on the digital side because of the restrictions of the form factor, or on the television side because of the restrictions of being on a cable pipe or a satellite dish as opposed to an IP enabled platform, right? So both of those opportunities present, a lot of new sort of, business ideas, a lot of new ways of segmenting, targeting, measuring, and reporting back on your campaigns and the audience. And that's really where we're seeing a lot of the innovation. Obviously, interactivity is a big piece of it as well, right? Being on a IP based backbone, you can now, it's two-way communication as opposed to one-way communication. So now you can do a whole bunch of different things with it, both in terms of the ad experience, but then also in terms of engagement and click throughs and QR code scans and things like that.
Do you find the ad business today, like, it's able to support the entire business essentially, or is it? I mean, like, is that? I mean, is most of the revenue from ads? Is there any kind of subscription revenue? Like, how have you thought about the business model evolving over time?
Yeah. We've always, since the very beginning, we've been ad supported 100%. And again, part of it is the sort of origins and how we were looking at YouTube and how we were, looking at the scale that YouTube was getting and, the advertising shift and whatnot. And so we felt like one, that is a really viable sort of way to sustain a business. But then also two, as we thought about the subscription, and there was a time when subscriptions were all the rage, right? This is when Netflix was getting into the streaming space, and everybody and their mother wanted to launch a subscription based SWOT service. And so we went through a period where, both from a content acquisition standpoint, but then also from a distribution standpoint, everybody was talking was subscriptions, and we just felt that it's not the place for us, because we could see a future where you would have all these big networks, right? Which is what has happened recently. All these big networks would launch their own subscription services. So whether it be Disney and NBC or you name it, they would have their subscription services. And so now you're trying to compete, with all of these, big behemoths for content rights, for distribution, for, share of wallet. And we just felt like, again, given how and the future that, we were looking at, it was not the place for us. Right. And we felt like at the end of the day, there's, tens of billions of dollars that are spent in the advertising world on linear and cable television. As linear viewership continues to decline, that has to move somewhere. It's not going to move into digital. It was our firm belief that it's going to move into television, because that's what these brands have been buying, right? So we wanted to be the place where these brands could come in, one, find their audience, and two, spend their money.
What are your biggest goals right now? Like, what do you want to accomplish yet that you haven't accomplished?
I would say continuing to scale. I think there is an opportunity for us where, we're really the only independent streaming service of scale that's still around the marketplace. And so there's a huge opportunity for us to, continue to compete with these bigger services and companies, especially, given the fact that we are focusing on AVOD and ad supported as opposed to subscriptions. And there's a lot of baggage that the legacy companies are carrying, right? And you see this over the last 2 years or 3 years, where there's been so much consolidation in the industry. There's, downward pressure in terms of how much they need to scale, and, where they need to be from a revenue and cost and profitability perspective, with the Wall Street and whatnot. And so we really feel that there's a phenomenal opportunity for us to continue to grow and scale. But that also is the challenge, right? Because we're not a household brand name, like a Hulu or a Disney Plus or HBO Max. And so that's where we need to continue to focus, and we need to continue to invest and provide the users the right experience that they would value, so that, once they're on the service, they will continue to come back and watch content. But really, in this industry, whether you're on the subscription side or on the ad supported side, scale's the name of the game. And so that's what we're focused on.
Do you think more original content that you guys create is going to help get there? Or is it just more about partnerships?
I think it's both. I think there has to be uniqueness in the service, right? And so I think original content helps. But once the users are in, a lot of the times they just want to watch something that they've heard of and they're comfortable with, right? And so that's really where having enough of that library content helps, because once the users are in, it helps you keep them around and coming back. So So I think it has to be both. We've dabbled with original content over the last year or two, and we're continuing to sort of evaluate our strategy there and how we want to continue to scale that up. But I think it's a combination of both.
Well, that was all the questions that I had, Vikrant. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think it's amazing how, like you mentioned, you're like the only kind of streaming service out there, really, besides some of these, established, well-known companies that have a ton of backing behind them, and you've been able to build out and carve out a niche over here that's really great and solve the trend for kids very early. So, I'm excited to see where this continues to go and what you're going to do. And I think there's a lot more to come from this, Vikrant. So, thanks for coming on.